Welcome to the Poudre River Restoration Initiative Phase 2 Open House. A few things to keep in mind as you're finding your seats. Tonight's focus is on the Poudre River. This project is focused on creating a plan for the next 20 years. The details of funding and phasing are yet to be determined. We're doing a master plan for the Poudre River now to deeply understand flooding issues, listen to you all, to our community, stakeholders, and illustrate a solution that everyone supports. All right, well, thank you for attending. We're excited to hear from you all, and if everyone's ready, we can get started.
Thank you so much to you all for coming out on a Thursday night. We know you all have busy schedules, and there's a lot of different initiatives you could participate with, and you're here to support us in our efforts. We really hope that you share enthusiasm for what we're trying to do, and also give us your questions and your concerns. And if you don't like anything we have to say, we do have snacks, so please get those. Did everyone get snacks? Okay. So we're breaking the presentation into 4 different parts. We're going to start with who are we and what on earth are we doing? What have we learned so far from you, the city, and a key group of stakeholders? How are we approaching the design? And then we're going to break out, as Victoria said, into an engagement activity where we can have one-on-one conversations with the consultant team, and that'll be in the back of the room. So, our firm, MVVA, there's 4 of us here tonight. My name's Scott. We are known for our work across the country that all started with master plans. They all started in meetings like this, where we listened to the community, we worked with the city, and over a long period of time, we implemented those ideas. On average, these projects take about 20 years, some 30. It's a slow, complicated, expensive process, but we got to start somewhere, and that starts now. We also invited our friends at Interfluve to join us, and we have Jonathan here. He's in the purple shirt. And their expertise is in river restoration and water resource engineering. It's a really complicated process to work with rivers. It involves ecology, engineering, and working with city fabric, and they've done that throughout the country as well. So our goals for this project, first and foremost, is to protect human lives. And that's developing a strategy to pass the 100-year flood event and protect the city fabric. From there, we really want to make the Poudre River the community anchor and economic driver that it deserves to be. Our goal is to restore wildlife habitats and natural river features, improve the pedestrian circulation and access, and finally, support Greeley's growth by making the river welcoming and expanding recreational opportunities. I'm sure many of you know this, but Greeley has the lowest median age in Colorado out of any city at age 32. And there's a lot of young families moving here. So this plan is for everyone here, but also for future generations as well. For about 10 months, we've been working on this plan, kind of behind closed doors a bit. We've had some pop-up events. We've been coming to you, and we're doing a whole lot of data collection. It takes a lot of time to understand how a river moves and what the issues are. We've met with every single city agency, with a whole wide range of stakeholders, and now we're finally at our first kind of group public meeting where you're coming to us and you're seeing our progress. That's gonna happen again in June, and that'll be what we're calling the big unveil. That's where we'll be showing you the plan. And then finally in August, that's when it goes to City Council for support. So between now and June is really a critical time to provide your feedback. So where is the study area? During phase 1, we were looking at about 22 miles of river, and that started at North 95th Ave to the west and went all the way out to the confluence of the Poudre River and the Platte River to the east. That allowed us to really assess the health, the flooding, the uses of the river. And what we've ultimately determined is that for phase 2, we're gonna focus on what we call the urban reaches. And that's that green shape. That's the downtown core area. And the reason why we're focusing on that is because it needs the most love and it will yield the most benefit to flooding in the downtown area especially. So what have we learned so far? We've been to Weld Walls, the Greeley Farmers Market. We went to the Funplex, went to a Halloween event that was a lot of fun. And we've also engaged children during GIS Day of various age ranges. And mostly we just wanted to know what people wanted to do. So what did we learn? We had 1,400 responses on circulation, and people wanted easy access from their neighborhoods that they don't feel that they have right now. And they wanted a combination of both passive strolling trails and active biking trails as well. Related to economic development, there was a big interest in having waterside restaurants, entertainment, a more kind of urban edge along the water, if you will. There was interest in having flexible event spaces for weekly movies, concerts, farmers markets, making it that community anchor that it deserves to be. And would there be an opportunity for water-based events throughout the year, just with a restored and more accessible river corridor? Related to water recreation, we hear a lot about an interest in tubing. This is a relatively low flow river, so it's not going to be the case that we're able to do that all the time. But in spring high flows, we definitely might be able to. So we're trying to assess if that's realistic or not for this river. There's also a lot of gravel ponds, like Poudre River, for example, where paddling activities are growing in popularity. So stand-up paddleboarding, kayaking, canoeing, we could certainly see a lot more of that around the Poudre. And then finally, fishing and habitat enhancement that supports that fishing was a big interest to the public as well. And then finally, for parks and recreation, there was a lot of interest in outdoor play. I think that's those young families who just want a lot of options, free options to take their kids to, and really support an inclusive environment where all ages and abilities feel welcome, family fun areas where everyone's comfortable and invited. There was a strong interest in renaturing the river for people and wildlife. We heard that a lot. And then finally, more about the Poudre being an economic and recreational driver for the city. So as we were doing all that public outreach, concurrently, we were meeting with all the city departments, community development, culture, parks and rec, water and sewer, economic development, public works, and really understanding all of their questions and concerns, because almost every single agency has some stake in this river. And then also with the city staff, we're able to do charrettes where we draw together and really enjoy the creativity of the process as well. And they gave us a very different list of homework than the public. They said, prioritize conservation. There's some areas that are already great, don't touch them. We agree. Leverage infrastructure challenges. Essentially, if there's a big infrastructure problem, we can also use that to make great city fabric. Focus on, respect water law. We are experts in water law now. Not really, but it's very complicated. Focus on actionable projects. We don't want to get all this feedback from you all and get a master plan that just goes on a shelf somewhere and there's no implementation. So how do we actually think about the steps that need to be taken to implement a project as complicated and large scale as this one? And then finally, also incorporate long-term vision. We need to get it right now. So how are we approaching the design? Let's just start with a little bit of historic context. So, 1876. This is really what the first settlers of Greeley saw along the Poudre. And before that, you had the Ute, Arapaho, and Cheyenne tribes, among other tribes, who utilized this river corridor for their life. We're in the Great Plains, and the river corridors are where you have those large cottonwoods. It's where there's habitat, it's where there's animals, there's food sources, and the water itself was the biggest asset at that time. And in 1911, J.R. Todd told a story that I must share with you. The river's crystal clear waters teemed with speckled mountain trout, its banks lined with cottonwood, box elder, and willow, and ever watchful over this unspoiled landscape rose the majestic Rocky Mountains. like grim sentinels monitoring the advance of civilization into their domain. Truly, the Poudre Valley in that year appeared a true Eden, untouched by man's hand. Wow. We have evidence of that dating back as far as 1948. And you see a very different Greeley there. You see downtown starting to establish itself, utilizing this river and all its value and its water for irrigation of crops and cattle production. And what you see is a meandering river. It has all the space in the world to grow. There's side channels all over the place, and you can see the gallery of cottonwoods. Even in these old oxbows, you see all the trees there still. And it had plenty of room to grow and breathe. For very good reason, and to support the industry and businesses of Greeley, gravel mining started for the production of concrete, asphalt, and other construction materials, and the river began to straighten for industrial uses around it. So those are very important operations for the vitality of Greeley, and that continued until now, and it will continue. So by 1993, you can really see that the infrastructural uses dominate the river corridor and are doing very important work for the livelihood of Greeley. But the consequence of that is that the Poudre has lost 2 miles of river length in Greeley. And that's for the whole of Greeley, not just this viewport, but that causes problems. And Jonathan's gonna talk more about that. And what we also see is that urban growth is kind of expanding away from the river. It almost appears that the river is more of a liability in the perception of some than an asset. And all the development is really occurring to the south and to the west. Greeley has what they call a long-range expected growth area. This is where Greeley wants to see growth, and they want the Poudre River to kind of be centered within the city. So we really need to think about what we can do to this river to allow it to remain a working river, but also make it an amenity for the public. And now is kind of the perfect timing given some of the other initiatives in the city. And we cannot understate the importance of some of this working river in the industries and businesses that thrive from it. It's everything from crop agriculture to the beef industry, oil and gas, and of course gravel mining and water storage. So all of those uses will stay in our plan. I'm going to now pass it on to Jonathan to share some of his perspective.
Thank you, Scott. I am Jonathan Kusa with Interfluve. I'm a professional engineer, and so I am here to talk a little engineering and a smear of ecology as well, because that's what my firm does too, is ecology and geomorphology and engineering. So as Scott said, though, is we've got a river, we've got a working river, we've got a lot of impacts to the river. Those impacts over time have caused what we see here, and I'm going to explain this map to you. This is a floodplain map that every community in the United States has developed something similar to this based on modeling and assessment of their landscape. They then submit that to FEMA. FEMA then approves it, and this becomes the legal document that defines where the water goes and whether you need flood insurance or things like that. So I'm going to just explain really quick what these things are in here, because this is somewhat important, especially close to the city. So the floodway, this dark blue line, is where water flows when you have roughly a 100-year, or called a 1% event. And I'm going to talk about why I want to say 1% in a second. But you'll note here that the water sometimes follows the river channel and sometimes pops out and flows adjacent to the river channel, depending on what's happening on the landscape and what constrictions within the river corridor or lack of corridor there is for the river to flow. The 100-year zone is technically the 1% flood area. Some smart person did the math and said, well, 1% is 1 over 100, so it's 1 every 100 years. That's not true. It's 1% every year, which means over a 30-year mortgage, you've got roughly a 26% chance, that's 1 in 4, that you're going to see a flood at your house. And so I want to emphasize the importance of understanding that. It says 100-year zone because we've gotten used to just using that, but it's truly 1% a year, which means 25% chance, 1 in 4 over 30 years. So this lighter greenish blue area is what floods in that 1% of the time every year. And then the 500-year flood zone, or 0.2% of the time, is this orange out here. And you can see how that extends out typically from the blue. So with that in mind, my job is typically to say, yeah, it's pretty easy, water flows downhill. Unfortunately, water flows downhill and it flows through people's properties. It risks and jeopardizes people's livelihood and their lives. And so we're looking to develop a plan that recognizes this and tries to design within that knowledge and not to deny that that's existing and is going to happen. So especially as it comes to the downtown area here, you can see the importance of understanding that, because the water flows within the river channel. Where's my pointer? Top one. Flows within the river channel up here, but also is flowing through the community. And so just that's an important aspect that we want to recognize and we want to try and mitigate with our plan, as Scott noted, is to avoid some of the flood events that have occurred and are highly likely to occur again and again, and as growth occurs is going to become more problematic. All right, so what do we do to address that? This is the Don River in Toronto. You can see downtown over here. There's a project that we worked on with MVVA. It is finalizing. Hoping ribbon cutting should be sometime later this year. This entire area here was just a large industrial site. The former river flowed back here along this channel. We designed a very large park space with MVVA that accommodated a new river with adjacent wetlands. And what we did is we wanted to contain all the water that was flowing across the entirety of the landscape through here previously within the park space. And so we essentially created a new river mouth and then made enough room for that river mouth to take all the water during their regulatory event, or their 1%-ish event. It's actually larger than that. But the water then flows, as you can see, across a wetland here. But that is the intent that we're going to replicate with the Poudre adjacent to the community. We also want to recognize that we're not going to solve all the flooding problems. There's a lot of stormwater issues in the community, small pipes that need to be larger pipes that then take the water away from where people are living and where they're working. Our job is to understand that that is going to be in process, and we are going to provide treatment of that water before it just dumps right into the river and impairs water quality and creates issues within the river system. So we understand that our project, as the master plan, is going to be receiving some of that water. It already receives that water and will likely receive more. And so we're looking at understanding how to make enough space for us to receive that water, treat it, and then put that into the river. Again, more flooding photos. Outdated infrastructure struggles. Again, this managing stormwater downtown is just reemphasizing that it's part of the entirety of the question that we're trying to solve here. All right, with that, one of the things that you can do with stormwater, though, is yes, you got to treat it, but doesn't mean you have to treat it in some sort of ugly-looking pond or system like that. This is a park that MVVA did in New York, which should treat stormwater. So you can have multiple uses of areas that need to treat stormwater, but then also maybe are soccer fields or naturalized walking spaces and things like that. So we're looking for the intersection of use on landscapes that can support the community in different ways. Bridges, debris and water overwhelm. So a lot of our discussion is going to be around infrastructure. The bridges currently do stack up material. There's also some sediment buildup on it says points here, but it actually should be pointing back here, of material that is being deposited because of the way the bridge impacts how the river flows. And then no room for trail pedestrian access. So if you're trying to be a person walking along the river, there's a lot of spots where you just can't get through without hopping up and over the road and back down again. And so we're looking at the crossings in particular as an element that we want to update. This is up in Toronto again. The river's flowing here. We've got a back channel wetland, but a very large bridge span to accommodate these large flood flows, accommodate pedestrians going through, accommodate, and this is again just post-construction, but accommodating ecology as it evolves. Making room for the river. As I've had already a couple conversations here in the room, you've got the floodway boundaries are well past where the actual river corridor is. Again, modeled by others than us, that we want to recognize are giving us the idea of like how much water is going to be out there. And so this is in San Antonio. This is one of our projects, but we essentially drew a boundary to the water for the river, and we moved some of the levees and the restrictions back, but gave the river more room to navigate those floodwaters so that it wasn't spilling out into the community. It was staying within the defined system that we wanted to define it as. Now we like more room is better than less room, but that's the give and take within urban communities. Here in Greeley, you can see here how we've got some hardened banks with riprap and other materials. It's a very tight channel. You've got gravel ponds that have been mined out adjacent to the waterway, that thus constricting how the river has a chance to flow, and there's no floodplain to allow that river to spread out. And in my simple world, it's really a balance of how much room does the river have in width to flow down, and then how much height do you need to put on the levees to keep it. If you have a really tight river, you have to have super high levees. If you have a really wide river plain, floodplain and river, then maybe you just need really low boundaries between that river and the adjacent community. And we attempt to naturalize the corridor as we go. So this is a project for us up in Michigan. This is a brand new river that got put in here, but you can see the connectivity of green space along here. This is also being developed along the sides, but preserving and protecting and maintaining some ability to have green space that is continuous along the corridor. Poudre ponds and others that are kind of tough and somewhat uninviting if you're going to go out there and paddleboard. Our intent is to support those that want to go out and experience nature and explore nature with their paddleboard, so they're going to see some nature and have some shade possibly and some trees and maybe some adjacent ecology that can utilize that pond in addition to the water storage features of this pond. Habitat and ecology, the final element I'll hit on, is first and foremost focused on conservation. We've got a large stretch of the river that we're looking at, not all of which is downtown. The areas that are not within the kind of urban core, we'll call it right now, there's some really nice spots there, and we want to preserve those. So first and foremost is the conservation focused. And then once we move beyond the conservation of areas that are already nice, we want to focus on some of the strategic actions that might help reconnect, restore, and enhance the river's corridor. And that's what we're working towards and looking for your feedback on as we develop those ideas, and we'll be presenting those in June. You can see here, again, I was talking about that continuous green swath of woods along that project I showed, and you got little patches here in some of the spots here that are just disconnected. They're not super useful for any wildlife that might want to use the corridor, and nor is it useful for a human that wants to experience nature the entirety of the trail. You got a lot of sunshine here in the summer, and it's just not the aesthetic or ecological experience that you would hope for. We have looked at what vegetation will grow relative to water elevations. And so you can see low flow is here. The smart ecologists on my team have spent a lot of time figuring out where the various vegetation species grow relative to the water table, essentially. And so as we rethink the landscape, when we talk about floodplains, when we talk about the elevations of various land adjacent to the river, we can also then determine what plants will be able to grow in those spaces, and then we can design around those as we work with our landscape architect partners about, are there trails through here, or is this more of a naturalized area? We will understand then what that evolution of plant species is based on the ultimate driver of water and water availability. Of course, we're hoping for, you got, people out here looking at nature and egrets, and we've heard about the moose that was in town here, so could be a good moose corridor. I'm pointing that out right now, fellas. You like moose. We heard about the moose in town, so we do anticipate, and bear, and then of course your ubiquitous turkey. But we'll see what we get for wildlife here. And in all seriousness, we do anticipate a wildlife corridor. We've got a representative here from the state that can speak to herding moose out of the city of Greeley, in all reality. And we do anticipate that an enhanced corridor will bring in more wildlife through it, but it will also provide that wildlife a passage in and through the community rather than into it, ideally. Finally, as I mentioned, just to reiterate the key point of conserving intact ecosystems, while we do want to create new habitat where there is room to grow the river width and add to the ecological health of the entire system, we also want to conserve areas that have emergent vegetation and cottonwoods and shrub willows. And you can see that we've labeled some of the same things in this picture here that were in that cross section with the moose on it, based on the vegetation along the corridor. You already have a lot of it. It's just it's sparse and it's in pieces and parts all along the corridor, and we're just going to try and stitch that together a little bit through our actions. With that, I think, last point. The last one is water quality. I wanted to mention that because that's a key component. Everyone wants to throw their tube in the water or go fishing. If the river's not particularly clean, if it's got a lot of runoff, whether it be from industrial activities or ag or just stormwater runoff, no one's going to want to be next to the river. So part of what we're looking at too is trying to make sure that we can add more ecological activity and function. Plants generally will be cleaning the water. The water is going to be a healthier spot to recreate if we can address the stormwater as well as then the water within the channel with an improved connection into plants and vegetation within floodplains and wetlands and things like that we can put all through that corridor. So that is part of our goal as well, is to make sure we're keeping water quality in mind. And to do that, as I mentioned, this is again just looking down the path a little bit, is we pull ideas from all around the country and projects we've worked on. This is a golf course actually outside of Chicago. This is a stormwater wetland complex adjacent to the creek, which is running back here. This has actually won some awards for its use of stormwater and the systems that were put in place adjacent to the golf course. So what I'm saying is that we can win awards doing stormwater treatment work adjacent to rivers and streams. It's just a matter of thinking through it and make sure that you've got a good idea of how it's going to be implemented, how the people are going to use it, how the animals are going to use it, how the water is going to flow through it. All right, and I think I hand this back to Scott now to close us out.
Show of hands, has anyone seen a moose in Greeley? Whoa, that's way more than I thought. All right. So this is a little bit mean, but related to recreation and access, we wanted to highlight one of the more uninviting extents of the trail system, and just wanted to talk a little bit about how we think we can improve it. So one thing we hear a lot, if there's a single trail and you want to go for a nice passive stroll, you're worrying that people are flying by on their bikes. And especially with e-bikes these days, they're silent and terrifying. There's not much shade at all. And this landscape here doesn't know if it wants to be a river landscape and be connected to the floodplain or a Great Plain landscape. So it's just kind of caught in this in-between. So it just really isn't doing much ecologically. And then the path limit, if you're a pedestrian, you're like, why is it here? Why isn't it there? It just doesn't really have much intuition to it, if you will. And then finally, one of the big challenges is you have a lot of distance between access points. So if someone is on the path that you don't feel safe around, you don't have many moments to like jump off the path or bail out. So you want to have a lot more access points, which makes it safer feeling. So we really want to improve access, comfort, and safety. For example, like some of our Toronto work, this instance is in Corktown Common. To be critical of the park system, there are a lot of really great, well-loved parks in Greeley. We heard about it a lot in the community, but we think there could be more opportunity for things to do a range of activities, things that engage teenagers, things that engage the elderly, things that engage young children. So in general, we'd like to see a lot more variety of things to do in the park areas. So oftentimes, like at Brooklyn Bridge Park, you can have a park area that just looks like a beautiful lawn one day, but it can also be designed to accommodate large-scale events such as movies, concerts, etc. So we're going to be thinking really critically about how our park design can be great for every day and then also accommodate large-scale events and specialty uses as well. And we generally are thinking about the park system in categories right now. So the first category being that river corridor park. That's the zone along the river. The river is really the reason why you go to those park areas, and it's much more passive, ecologically, and nature-based. And then you also have Upland Neighborhood Park. So this area probably doesn't flood that often. It's kind of that edge condition and has a whole variety of things to do, but more catered to the specific neighborhoods they're around. We think in a few strategic moments, there should be astoundingly fun, cool parks. Parks that you would drive all the way from Denver or from Fort Collins to see. You'd bring your whole family. Maybe you get a night at a hotel here. You utilize the restaurants and businesses downtown. But it's a very different style of park than your average neighborhood park. We already mentioned it, but we have our stormwater parks that need to be designed to accommodate floodwaters from storm events. And then finally, our gravel ponds, which we hope to renature and really increase the recreational uses, whether it be paddle sports or fishing, etc. So now we're on to our engagement activity. There's a whole lot more content online for you to review on the Speak Up Greeley website. This chart is a very important chart. This is the basis of our design work. This would be very boring to go through, so we'd rather you go through it at your own leisure. But this kind of highlights some of those principles we developed in phase 1. And essentially what we hope to do with you is have one-on-one conversations, have you provide feedback with sticky notes, and then we have colored dots. So if you like something, give it a green dot. If you don't like it, give it a red dot. And if you're not sure, give it a yellow dot. And then we also have that large-scale map to facilitate discussion. I'm going to leave it here with the QR code for the Speak Up Greeley website. Please utilize that and please provide feedback either online or with us right now. Thank you.